I don't think that Madonna's trying to do
No,
this
no, I'm
under
not
the
suggesting
radar,
that, but I'm
Yeah,
saying
the
for ordinary
safeguards.
folks, yeah, where are the safeguards that
Yeah.
ensure that, you know, these kids are being taken care of?
Well, Madonna being such a high-profile person, she has the
Right.
media. The
Right.
paparazzi first
Right,
of all
no,
is
I'm
going to be
saying
the
for
ones
the
that watch her.
ordinary folks.
Oh, but, well, if they go to school, there's a school system in place. American children are required to go to the doctor.
Right, but why isn't there, for example, some central registry of, you know, foreign children who are brought into the country, and why aren't they being tracked on an ongoing basis? You know, that's,
But why
or
should it
is
just be
there,
foreign children?
no, I'm not saying,
Oh, no.
no, you're,
You trying to face off right
no,
now?
I mean, all kids, you know, we have so many
Your
American
point.
kids
I
that
know,
fall
your
through the
point.
cracks. Right.
right.
So, I mean, all kids are monitored under the same guidelines.
Okay.
So they would have to, you know, be monitored and meet the same standards as any other child. They have to be registered in school. You know, it's against the law if you don't put your child in school. In school, if you miss a certain amount of days
put it
of
this way,
school.
put it this way, when a kid is born here in America, there is a record, okay,
Yes.
of the child being born. So presumably, if that child does not enter the school system by a certain age,
Right.
there's some agency that will pick up on that and that will start to make inquiries. A child who is brought into the U.S. from outside, the only record is of their arrival here.
There's a lot
Does
of
the
paperwork.
INS, for example,
Yeah,
track
because
that?
you can't just bring a child into
Right.
the country without having the proper
paperwork.
documentation. A passport that
Right.
says that they're allowed to visit. And even my father, who travels to Jamaica a lot, will take my niece, which is my sister's daughter, and he has to have a certified note from both parents
Right.
saying that he's been given permission
Right.
just to take the
Bring-
child in and out of the country.
Okay, okay. So hopefully the INS is tracking this, you know, in the same way that the birth records at the hospital will tie into the
Yeah.
school system at some stage. Hopefully the INS records will tie into the rest of the social welfare.
And you know, no
at
system
some
is
stage.
foolproof because we have kids born in America that are not being tracked. You know,
Oh, yeah.
kids born at home and so on. I think they do the best that they can. But
Yeah, I think
I want to take this conversation up another notch.
But before you do that, let me mention one thing as well. I mean, when I was in Malawi and they were discussing this was back in February, because she was on her way, and I think she's there now. Most Malawians that were calling into radio stations and, you know, that the newspapers and so forth would talk to, like 90% of Malawians was that, you know, said, hey, if she can give this child a better life, then she should be able to do it. So it's very interesting. So the laws are one thing, but people's perceptions are, if life can be better for this child, you know, outside of Malawi, then hey, she deserves a better life.
Which is a great segue for the deeper conversation I want to have. That is, irrespective of the continent, does it matter who's adopting the child? As long as that person can give that child a better life.
I think there is a responsibility of the adoptive parents, though, to make sure that that child knows their culture and understands their background. I think we've all met people who, even into adulthood, struggle with identity issues, and we all do as human beings. You know, either black, white, Asian, Latin. I mean, I think a lot. You know, whether it was younger, or wanted to be blonde hair, blue eyed, but that's what you saw on TV, the models, or so forth. But when I've seen cases where parents from the States or so forth will adopt a child from Africa or Asia or so forth, and there isn't that continuity of culture.
Well, let me just ask you, because I see so many African-American children right here in the United States, born to two African-American parents who don't know anything about African-American history. So what do you feel about that?
Lisa?
Sorry.
I appreciate the question, but how do you face off?
I know.
No, I wanted to add to something that you said about 90% of the people from Malawi with the media coverage. I think I saw yesterday on the news after she was denied. Lots of kids in Malawi with signs saying "Adopt me." You know, I thought that was telling exactly.
Just to, I think this is a great topic. A couple things come to mind as well, because as it relates to the overall question of what does it mean to raise a
Adjusted.
adjusted, that's probably the best way, functioning adult, taking a person from infancy, in many cases, to adulthood in a way that I think we all would agree this person can make contributions, can function on their own, can avoid, to the extent possible, running afoul of the law, understands these things. At the end of the day, I mean, raising this question, it's almost one of the, which do we value more? On the one hand, we're talking about culture, and there seems to be an assumption that culture provides the framework and the structure for bringing a person through that process. Whereas on the other hand, we're also talking about economic wherewithal, which is simply, regardless of culture, if you can provide food, shelter, education, and reasonable preparation for life, call them life skills, then that is sufficient, separate from culture. And I think those are two things that might benefit from being separated. A question that popped into my head was, with regard to culture, say you had a child who was from challenging economic circumstances, be it in a country like Malawi or Swaziland, or I could go through, or Detroit, Haiti. There are any number of countries around the world where this could be applicable. But some individuals as adults are more motivated perhaps to pass along, use their economic resources to promote certain cultural values. And while this may be provocative, I'm thinking we had a wonderful meal, but it's okay to step up the conversation and be slightly provocative. What if you had a child from, let's say, Southern Sudan, or more importantly, Darfur, which is getting a lot of attention these days, and we say, isn't this horrible? This is terrible. But that child actually might be from a Muslim background. But those who care most about what's happening in this country perhaps don't share the same religious background, yet are highly motivated to try to make a difference. And they say, I can feed this child, clothe this child, and I will bring them up, in this case, in a proper Buddhist tradition. Now, I didn't say Christian for deliberate reasons, but I mean, that's where they're coming. But let's just say, all things being equal, I've got the money, I happen to be a practicing Buddhist. Although Buddhism is considered more of a philosophy than a religion. They say so, but let me say, raise them in the Jewish tradition. Would we have a problem with that? And if that child becomes a well-balanced, functioning adult, 12, 13, 20 years down the line, and they are an observant Jew. What's wrong with that versus?
I think I would have a problem with that.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Identity is very important. What happens when you do that? That's one less person, okay, to carry on the tradition.
Oh, come on.
Okay.
No, but no.
It reminds me of that story with the Indians and that child that was adopted. He had like 1/8 of Indian blood, and he was returned. Does anybody know that story?
Native American?
A Native American, I'm sorry. Do you remember that story?
I don't.
He was adopted by a couple who had no Native American background, and 8 months after he was adopted, I think the mother, who had been drug addicted, appealed to get him back, and there's a law in the state, and I don't remember what state, that said he had to be returned because he had 1/8 blood.
Yes.
But he was being returned to a drug-addicted mother, being pulled away from a loving family.
Well, and
Okay, but wait a minute. I'm sorry, not to cut you off. There might be a system in place so that he's not returned to that drug-addicted mother. I don't think he'll be returned to a drug-addicted mother.
Well, he's going to be returned to her family. But her family wasn't available to take care of him initially. That's why he was available for adoption.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is he was being pulled from this intact family who didn't share the same cultural background per se, but they were providing love and affection. They were raising this child very well, and to remove him from that, what about the child's well-being?